So in this video, we're going to talk about the application lifecycle of Android applications and the importance of this on how you handle things that are in memory, when to save persistent data to some kind of storage, due to the major differences between mobile application lifecycle and desktop application lifecycle. So let's get to it. So one of the most important things in mobile development and what people get wrong is to not pay attention to the life cycle of the application. So even though this is a little bit boring and you really want to get going with Android and you want to make some UI and do things, we need to stop and start with the most important thing, which is understanding how your application is alive, when it's alive, what's in memory, when it gets restored, so that you don't make basic mistakes of when to do things in code. So that's what we're going to look at in this video, so let's get going. So the first thing we're going to do is create a new Android Xamarin application, not the XAML, just the Android one. There's yet another Xamarin bug for you. Create a new project and it fails. Let's try again. And there we go, just randomly works this time. Got a lot of Xamarin. So we have a single view application is fine for this one. This is just more about the life cycle, so I don't really care about what it generates. So we'll just let this create. And then the first thing we're going to do is make a bunch of overrides to handle certain life cycle events, things that we want to monitor. So I'm just going to select all and minimize them. So we've already got the onCreate. We've got onCreate options menu. It's just part of what it's doing to make a menu. So these three are nothing to do with what we're interested in, if you will. So this can be app specific. Specific code for now. So I'll just wrap that out of the way. We'll come back to that. What I'm mainly interested in is this lifecycle. So I'm just going to add a bunch of overrides, and I'm going to do them in some kind of order. I'm going to override on start, then I'm going to override post create, the state not saved, which we'll come to in another video, but I'll keep that in there so you can see where it gets called and when. Then there is resume, I believe, on resume. Then there's on post resume. Then we have another one, use leave a hint. Use leave a hint, that doesn't sound right. User leave hint, which is a hint that when the user is about to close your application. We've got on pause, which is nothing we've done yet. On save state, we'll do save or restore, yeah. So on save instant state, we'll also do the other one. Then there's on stop. And you can see there's a lot of events already, so I'm sure you'll be already realizing the complexity of handling a mobile application lifecycle. So we have, what else have we got left? We've got restart, resume, we've got post resume. We've got post create, which I've missed, that can go up the top. I thought I did that. On create, on start. Oh, there's multiple post creates. There's the two on this one of them. Then we have all these. We have on. What have we got left? We've got anything on post left? No. So we've got on create. There's loads of different create ones, depending on how your application gets created. So we'll just hook into all the on creates to make sure we get the. In fact, there's only the two. They're the context menus. So they're the two on creates. Let's minimize these again. And we have finish as well, which is not exactly a lifecycle state. I just want to show you when that gets called. We've got on destroy, and the application is finally finished. And I think we're about done there. So we've got on pause, we have, just whiz through, see if there's anything else I've missed. I don't think so, not on anything that I'm too concerned about. No, so they're the primary ones. So what we have now is a bunch of lifecycle events, with the exception of this one. This is when it's actually going to finish. And all these are going to get called during a certain point in time. And we want to see when that time is, basically. We want to figure out when something's going to get called and then react correctly, and also to make sure we have any data saved, and when we want to save it and what we do with data. So I'm now going to spin up the actual phone, and we'll connect to it and deploy this application to it. We'll just add some log statements first so we can see some basic log outputs. So let's just add the log outputs first. So if we go into all of these, and at the very top, I will just do debug dot. Okay, let's just do console for now. Console.writeLine. In fact, debug will just be. Which one's that going to? So going to Android's debugger. Mono debugger. Yeah, I thought so. There is one for Android, but we'll just use console for now. That'll bubble down the same. So we'll just do a write line, and then just to make it really clear where we are, we'll just spin out and put on create. So we'll log in all of these. We'll just chuck a log, and we will, I'll just put that 2 because it's got 2 parameters. We'll log all of these entries so that we can see in the debugger where things, or rather when things are happening. So this will be on post create 2. State not saved again. We won't actually really bother with the state saved in this video, but that we will do in the next video when it comes to handling actually saving your state and restoring it. But you need to understand in the first place what that means. So let's just go through all these and then deploy to a phone. That's 2. And then I'll also show you a official Android diagram that makes this easier to see. But I never start with that. I always start with just overriding events, seeing for myself on a real device what happens, making my own assessments, and then validating with the documentation afterwards. So I get, I'm not biased, I'm not being told something is going to work a specific way and then I find out later it works differently. So there's a bunch of events, rather logs for when the event happens. So we'll just compile that and make sure it still compiles. And then if it does, we'll go ahead and push this to an actual phone. So still just building, it takes a second. Or a little bit more than a second in Xamarin's case. There we go, just about built. Cool. Okay, so let's connect the phone to the computer first via USB. And you can then just use the phone like this if you want. Because I want to record the screen, I'll obviously set it up wireless. So we'll just do ADB devices, make sure it's there. Then we'll do ADB TCP IP and a default port. This will allow the phone itself to go into wireless mode. Now I can just unplug the USB cable, connect it to my screen, and then you should see in a moment, it should, there we go, give you the output. So you can now see my screen. I've just got a slightly dodgy HDMI cable at the minute. There we go. So we have the phone connected there. Now in here, we just need to go on the phone settings, go to the network, which is my network, and then in here on the computer, oh, realizing you can't see this yet, Now let's just drag this over to here and go across to just match. And now we bring this back up. So on this side here, now we do ADB connect and the IP address, which is 192.168.2.42, and then we're connected. So now we should be connected to the phone. This is factory reset phone, so we're on a fresh phone now. So if we try to push this with F5, this will probably take 30 seconds to a minute maybe. And what we're going to look at is the output here. So if I was to pin this output, we can hide that bit, we don't need that. And what we're mainly interested in here is the output of the logs that we made. So we should see squiggly lines and logs. And what we want to see is what order things happen in. So we'll have to open like a notepad and clear off all this extra junk that we see here. But what we want to do is make our own assessment of when we use the phone in a few ways, the most common ways, what actually happens and when and in what order. And then we will compare that to the actual Android documentation itself to confirm our findings. And then I'll talk through after that what that means and the importance of how to think about your code. And even though there's a lot to it, there's a lot of things that are, and so now we have to push this twice. There are a lot of things involved in the process, and there's a lot of events. It's actually fairly simple once you understand and appreciate the way it works. So don't be too afraid. It's not like, it is complicated, but it's not overly complicated. So here's the application. It's spun up. So we can see here now we've got a lot of logs. All this is mono getting started before our application even starts. So there's nothing in that log that we care about. But we go down further and we should start seeing our squiggly lines, which apparently we haven't. Why have we not seen our logs? Oh, we have, they're just there, I can barely see them. So there's the logs that we have. And we're also in debug. Yeah, that's fine. So that's the log, and then on create up there. So I wasn't noticing this side. Gotta look here. So let's just go back up. Yep, fine. So what we have is these events here. So I just copy those and open up a notepad and paste them in, and then clear off all the other stuff. You'll see what we have is we've opened the app, we've done nothing with it yet, we've simply got it open. And these are the events we've got. So if we were to say app start, and you've got these events. And now in the app itself, I guess the first thing I'll do is simply press the back button. So if I tap the back button and it closes, and I probably should have cleared off the events so we could see them easier as well. But you can see as we scroll down, these are the events we seem to have got. So if we copy those and go back to the notepad, and we'll just do back button, paste that in, we see we've got a finish event, a pause event. Ignore the duplicate because this is simply the console logger will write to two places. One's the Android logger and the other's the actual console itself. So kind of ignore the duplicate because it hasn't actually run twice. So there's the events we're seeing when we hit the back button. So now if we go back to the app, so if we swipe up and click on the app to there and it reopens, we finished on destroy, which was here. And then we've ended up getting now a create, a post, a create, a start, and then a resume. So if we copy those, paste them into here. So this is reopen app. And this is why I always like to do it as well. I like to do it myself and see exactly what does happen, like I say, instead of being told. And then we can make our own assumptions in case documentation's wrong as well. So we started the app, which will create it and spin it up. We press the back button, which if there's no history in the app, so we haven't navigated between pages, the app will close, and this will actually call finish, which will finish the application, which it will then destroy the application. So that's a graceful close, if you will. And then you've got the reopen of the app when it's been completely killed. And we've got another event where you can simply press the home button. So we just clear this off first to make that clearer. Now if we press the home button, you can see now the events we get here. So we copy that over and open up the notepad. So home button. And we've got the on-user leave event, which is the one I wanted to add that isn't usually documented, but that's just as the name described, it's a hint that the user is about to leave the application. And that's because we've pressed the home button in this case. And then what we have is a on save instant state, which is a hint that we might need to save some variables because we may be killed, if you will. And then a call to on stop. So then if we now go back into the applications, let's clear that off, and then on the phone reopen the application, we'll see then what events we get here. So if we now compare them, so reopen app, and we have on save, on state not saved, on restart, on start, on resume, on post resume. And then I guess, is there any other kind of actions we may want to cover? We've got the initial open, we've got the home press and the reopen, we've got the back button. We've also got one other thing, is we can press the menu button, so the bottom left icon on the phone here. So if I tap that, we'll get these ones. And let's see if that's of any relevance. So this is menu button, and this should compare, I would have thought, to the home button. I would have said that's the same action. So we've got on user, on leave, on save, on stop. Yeah, so the menu button or the home button give us the same reaction, and it's basically putting the application to the background. So it's not active right now, it's popped up, but it's still running, still in the running state. So if we tap it again to bring it back, we get the state not saved, restart, resume, post. And we should notice that is the same as when you simply reopen the app. State not saved, restart, start, resume. So we really have a few states here. There's not that many. And I'd say they're all documented here. And this is through our own observation now. So we've seen this for ourselves, if you will. This is what we know is happening. And now we want to make an assessment of what we've seen, and then it's a good time to now open the official documentation and marry up those two things. And then I'll talk about what that means for our application and when we should typically do standard application things. So let's just take a look at the official documentation. So for now, we've seen this, we've seen what happens when you click things. There's one other thing I could really show, which is regarding when things get lost, when things are recreated. But I'll cover that in a separate video about restoring memory. But it's an important thing to keep in mind. But I will talk through it, but there's no point really showing it. I'll do that in a separate video. So for now, we can stop that. We can maximize this back up. And we can just jump back to the PC. We don't need the phone on screen for now. So there is one thing I've just realized I forgot actually, is the instant kill. So I won't bother dragging this back to size for the minute because I just want to quickly show you this. But the one other event I forgot is if you actually kill the application forcefully. So we've got the logs here, let it spin up, clear all this. Now, if we were to pop up the menu and you've got these events and you've got stop. Now, if we were to just kill it by swiping across, you can see it just closes, it's dead, it's gone straight away. So there is obviously that, a user can kill your application. So that brings me to this little note I've just made at the bottom here, is that there's 2 points really. There's there's an instant kill, so instant kill, and there's no guaranteed calls. So basically at any point in time, the system or the user can kill your application and there's nothing you can do about it. There's no chance to do anything. So that'll be something else to keep in mind with your application. You can't ever guarantee a graceful close, and that's just how it is. So keep that one in mind. And on the same similar note, some of you might go, when you're creating stuff and you want to dispose stuff, you do override dispose. And then you put some dispose code in here. Well, that's actually not what you should do in Xamarin applications. You should use the onDestroy. And the reason for that, I've tried to find a good reason, but basically don't use dispose or Java finalize. Use onDestroy instead. And the best document I could find is this link here, which is a slide to someone that's done some advanced memory management on both devices to give some information. So I'll leave this link in the video, but I won't bother actually opening it up for now. You can go to that link, but the basics is you use onDestroy whenever you want to dispose things. Don't bother using dispose in this case. So with that little bit said, and the little bit of missing info, if you will, we can now get on to looking at our, well, in fact, that's what we want to open up, looking at this. And if we just bring up the activity documentation for Xamarin, and we just dock these to each other, we can now compare side by side. And I do recommend, by the way, you also read this as a supplement to this video, read all of this information. This is about the life cycle. And here you can see the given life cycle of an Android application. So we can now compare this to what we've observed. So you can see there's basically, really there's a few states to an application, and it's how you want to define them. But this document highlights them all and gives you descriptions and things. But I'll talk through my way and what I feel are the life cycles. So your application has started, however that started. The user clicks it, or we run it through Visual Studio. It starts up. The first thing you'll hit is the onCreate. The only next state it can go to is start. The only next state that can go to is resume. And the only state that can go to is paused. Then paused can either go to instantly killed, so your application doesn't exist, or it can go back to resuming, or it can go to stopped. So pause has three possible options. Once you're stopped, the application can be killed instantly, or restarted and it jumps back in at the start point and goes to the same loop. Or it can be destroyed, which then means it's also killed, if you will, after onDestroy is called. So this is the life cycle, and this is what you really need to focus on and understand. So I'll just compare these to what we've observed. So we've started the app and we've got these calls. So we've hit on create, which is right. Then we've hit start, which is right. Then we've hit post create, because that's an event I've hooked into, just show you, as an additional call in case you wanted to do something between certain, at a certain time level, if you will. So post create is called, even though it's not shown here, which interestingly is called after start. So that might be something you want to use after start. Then the save state also isn't shown, but that will be called in between these two parts. So you've got the post create and state not saved being invoked here. And we don't use those right now. And again, we'll talk about the state afterwards. Then you have on resume, which calls even when you first create it. That's just what it's called, on resume. And then there's nothing in between our events, between resume and on post resume in this case. So that's the startup. So we've seen this activity for ourselves. We've gone from launch to running. And in theory, that's all that can happen and should happen. Then once the activity is running, you do whatever you want to do. That's irrelevant to this kind of explanation. This is just about the life cycle in general. The only thing you can do after you've got to on resume is to then go to a pause state, or to be killed. At any point in time, you can be killed instantly. But in theory, even if the user tries to kill you instantly, you should always hit the on pause. And that's even if the system wants to kill you. So on resume, regardless of anything, should then always call on pause. And I've never known an instance where it won't go from resume to pause even before being instantly killed. And when we instantly killed, in order to do that, we press the menu button, which fired off this kind of reopen this kind of call. sorry, not this one, this one here, the home button and menu button. So we paused and then we stopped. Now the stop isn't always guaranteed. It can be paused and killed, but again, it's a rare case. So the only thing you can do from on resume is to go to on pause after your application's running. So we'll look at what we did. We did a back button press, say. So right now we're in on resume if you're actively running. We press a back button. The next thing that happens is the back button simply calls the finish action. And then the finish will then pause the application, which is correct. It's gone from resume to pause. And it'll decide now the activity is no longer visible because it's closed itself down. So it's gone to stop. And then the activity has been finished because there's nothing left, so it gets destroyed by the system. So we've gone in a straight line top to bottom, and that's the standard life cycle. So we've spun up, we've created, we've done something on screen, the users click back and it's closed. So this is kind of the straight line of the life cycle. So then we started to play with, well, what happens in different situations. So when we reopen the application now after being destroyed, rightfully so because it's gone, we should basically start again as if nothing was any different than the first one. So you can compare this one to this one, and you can see it's exactly the same. We've created, we've started, post-created, state not saved, resume and resume. So killing the application, if you will, destroying it, then wipes everything out. There's no memory, there's no nothing. It has truly gone from the system. So reopening just starts the loop again. So that's your normal and easy to understand life cycle. Now we move on to the more exotic ways, if you will. And these are the natural ways people use the phone. They press the home button, they browse around, other apps pop up over the top, notifications come in. All these things act very similar to this event. So this activity here is you're on resume and your app's in the foreground. So while your app's in the foreground, and that means it's on screen and nothing else is over it at all, you are running. If anything else happens, if anything comes over, a notification or a phone call comes in or another application goes over the top or you slide down, this will go to unpaused. And it's at this point then decisions get made. So in the case of the home button or the menu button, the app takes up part of the screen and not all. So it goes to paused and then it also goes to stopped. So you can see because it's no longer visible, it goes to stopped. The only other thing you can do from pause is to basically, there's not enough memory in the system, so it gets killed. So you can go from on pause to just simply dead, as if you've shut down here, but without passing through stop or destroyed. So that's one option, and that's rare. That's basically when your phone runs out of memory. The other option is it can come back to resume. So this is where another activity comes into the foreground, pops over, say, but the phone decides to keep your app running because it's still partly visible. So maybe there's a transparent overlay and you're typing a message in a notification. So you can go from on pause to resume, and that's the flow that you'll see. So if you're on paused, you're not fully visible on the screen. So we've seen that we've gone on pause when we press the home button or menu button, and it's also decided to stop our application. Now at the point of stopping the application, we've seen when we've simply stopped, we press the home button and we reopen. We don't get killed. We haven't gone to on destroy. We haven't gone to app killed. What we've done is taken this path here. We've gone from on stop up to restart. So you can see here we've gone to restart. And then when you come into restart, it just simply flows down as normal. So we go start, resume, and activity. And that's what we see here. So there's only a few, really I'd say two major flows to your application. And one is you start your application, it spins up, you do as normal, and then the application's killed and nothing else has happened in between. And that's the straight line you see on the document. And then the other really is where your app's put to the background almost. So it's partly visible or it's gone invisible. You've simply pressed the home button and you're browsing around. But people that don't develop apps might think those apps have been closed, or they might think they're all permanently running. And that's not the case. So when you press the home button, your application's still in memory. It's in the paused or stop state, but it's still in memory. It's in the RAM. Everything's available and everything's running. So your code can still be running. You've got things that are still active. And then it's up to the discretion of the operating system or the user then to say whether your application comes back into the foreground as the original application, or whether it got killed and then recreated as a whole new application, or whether it went the other route and it got partly restored based on the save state and the restore state. But really, there's two things to think about. Your application's either running and goes through the standard way and gets closed and disposed of, or it's getting what you could call tombstoned or put to the background, but still in memory. So you can think of it on a computer as having your emails open, and they're open in the background and running. So when you press the home button and your application's not visible on screen, just like minimizing your mail, it's still running, it's still there, but with a different flow in the activity lifecycle. And then the only tweak, really, the only difference in mobile applications is to think about, at any point in time, somebody could come and close your application. So that's like thinking about if you're on your computer and you minimize your mail, at any point in time, a gremlin can come along and just close your mail application. And that gremlin is the operating system or the user deciding to swipe and kill the application. So from an application developer standpoint, we have to consider, one, your application can be running all the time and be gracefully closed, or two, it can be going in and out of the foreground all the time. And while still in memory, that's no real different than kind of minimizing and maximizing. So you can choose to, say you've got an intensive thing on screen, you've got an intensive UI operation that's displaying something heavy, or you're doing something, very intense and you want live updates on the screen. When you go to a pause state, you might choose to suspend those heavy operations and to conserve battery life. And there's no point in doing something if the user isn't visibly looking at your screen. So you can consider that your code can be running without being visible, and that on a mobile device, because of the the battery concerns and the limited power and limited resources, we should consider not doing certain things if we're not visible on screen. And then the last point I really think is important is thinking about the state of memory in the application, and that's something I'll do a separate video on. But that's in terms of, the application can be killed at any point in time or disposed of a few minutes after it's been put to the background because the system wants to save memory and battery. So you have to start thinking about, well, if I've got, say, a user's form open and they're filling out a load of details, say you want to get their date of birth, the address, that you're gathering some information about the user, and you've asked them, say, what's their passport number. Now the user's gone, oh, well, I better go upstairs and find my passport. So they're gone for 5 minutes and they come back down and the operating system closed your application because the screen locked, it went to the background, and then it just cleaned up your app. And then the user reopens the app and all of a sudden all the information's gone because you didn't save that state, and that's an annoying user experience. So those kind of life cycle events we will come across and we will handle. But many people just brush over this and don't focus on the life cycle. And I really want you to pay some attention and understand the life cycle. And obviously, until we've made some applications, as always, it's much easier to demonstrate by a real world example. We haven't made an application yet, so it's hard to say this is what happens and this is how it happens, this is when. But I do want you to bear this video in mind as we progress forward, and we'll probably come back, or we'll touch on it throughout all the videos and state that, remember the life cycle and this is what's going to happen, and you can then refer back to this video. So with that said, let's just take another look at this, and I'll just scroll down to show you where there's a bit more information basically, but I would recommend you read this and you play with this life cycle and you get a feel for it. But I'll just quickly talk about where I typically do stuff in this application in relevance to, say, a WPF application. So as you can see, the only point in time where your application is brand new and comes from nothing is when it's killed, it comes in at the launched. If it's killed this way, it comes in at the create, which is the same as really being launched. There's very little difference. If you're still in memory and you're in the background, you're going to come in on the start point. So you can think the onCreate as your WPF application's actual startup, as if it's been started for the first time. So this is where you place your code. And if you scroll down here, you might find in the onCreate it gives you hints at that. So called when the activity is first created. This is where you should do all of your normal static setup, create views, and blah, blah, blah. So this document gives you all of that kind of information. It gives you the things I'm talking about, but this is my view of where you do it. So this is your application creation. The onStart then typically just goes on start to on resume. If you read the two and what they mean, on start is the activity call when it's becoming visible. So it's not yet visible. And they've also got states here which are handy. So can you be killed? So you can never be killed in these states while it's going up. On pause is a pre-state to be terminated. So you can be killed from the on pause. And then obviously the stop, and that can be destroyed. So you've got a guarantee here by the Android operating system that these create, restart, start, and resume. So these bits here, the application can never be terminated. So you're safe to do things in here. But as soon as you enter paused, from that point downwards, your application can be killed at any point in time. So back to what we were talking about, the start and the resume. So the on start is when it's becoming visible. So it's not yet visible, but it's about to be. And then followed by on resume when it goes to the foreground, or on stop if it becomes hidden. So on resume is called when the activity will start interacting with the user. So what it means is the on start will go to the on resume. And really there's not much gap between the start and the resume. It's basically this is starting up, but it's not yet visible to the user. So this is where your application's in memory, and now on the start point, this is like again in WPF before the form's actually displayed, which is you don't usually do much. You bind your dependency injection or things like that, but again you do that in the on create one-time events. Whereas on start is something that is only going to happen either after you've been created or after you've gone from background to foreground. So the on start you usually won't have anything in specifically, but there might be times where you want something in that's relevant to about to be displayed back to the user. So in this case, if we were saying if we've gone to pause and we want to say, or say we've gone to stop, we know we're completely hidden now, we're not on screen, and we decide to clean up some screen, or we want to refresh the screen every time it comes back in. So we can then be guaranteed that on start, we could load some information that we want to be displayed. So again, very hard to explain without an example, but that's what I'd use it for. But typically wouldn't do much there. The on resume then is when you're actually visible to the user. And again, that's basically what it states there. So at this point, this is where I would be obviously displaying the actual UI or going to the first page or going to wherever you want to. On pause is where I would save. I would presume that on pause, I'm going to be closed. There's a high potential now because it's the first state we've entered where we can be killed. So the on pause I would use to save any information. Let's presume that's like the user clicking the close button on a WPF application and we're about to be closed. Now it might not happen, but at this point in a mobile application, you've got to presume that, and you want to really save any information, write information to file, do whatever you want to do to ensure that if the application was terminated next, that when you come back to being created, you haven't lost anything important. And that's what I'd use the on pause for. On stop is really, if we read what their state says, so the paused is caused when the system is about to start resuming a previous activity. It's typically used to commit any unsafe changes, which is what I've just mentioned I would do, stop animations and other CPU intensive things. And then it's followed by either resuming if it comes back to the foreground or stopping. So the stopping is then the activity when it's no longer visible to the user. This may happen because a new activity has been started, and it doesn't really give you anything that it would do in this state, if you will. So on stop, it's not really telling you to do anything specific. It's not recommending anything, because I would do it in paused. And stop is just another milestone really to either be resumed or going, to be there. So I wouldn't really do much in stop, to be honest, other than maybe flag that we've stopped, but we're either going to die or be destroyed or restart. So there's nothing I would really do there. And then the on destroy I would only use for cleaning up memory. I wouldn't use it for saving data because that's what I'd do on pause for. On destroy, you are really just about making sure you clean up any loose ends, make sure you're not leaking any memory. But again, all these things that you do with the state are very much up to your discretion what you want to do with them. And again, as we build an application, all these kind of life cycles will make more sense and be easier to explain. But the point here is I just want to make very clear and very sure that you take the application lifecycle seriously. Don't get too overwhelmed at first thinking this is a huge document and sounds very complicated, because like I say, yes, it's a complicated lifecycle, but really there's only one exception. One is a normal application, like I say, that starts, goes through the process, finishes, and then the other is the sidetracked, where you either get killed instantly or you're going to be restored and you're going to come back in at a partial point in time. And the reason that is so important, and when I mentioned a lot of people make mistakes, is because people that don't understand this life cycle typically do stuff in the on start here, and they presume that that means the application's just starting up for the first time. So they might say here on start, oh, let me log into my web server, or let me do some go to the home page or something. And then what this leads to from a user point of view is they come into your application, they log in, they go through, and then they go to a different page of the application. Then they decide to just press the home button and go back into your application. So the home button, as we know, goes to the on stop, and then when you go back in, it goes to the restart. So then the user's code will come into on start and take them back to the home page. So what that leads to is that the user ends up having, and I'm sure you'll have seen this on some badly designed apps, where you go out in an application and all of a sudden it's like it's reloaded from fresh. And that's down to users that haven't understood the application lifecycle. So that's all there really is for this video. I want you to focus on the lifecycle as best you can, read all of that documentation, and then as we progress through the application next, we'll make some UI and make a home page and then log into Facetto. I want you to always have this lifecycle in the back of your mind, and to really think about, how that affects our application. But don't worry too much about it in the sense of you might be overwhelmed, because I will keep you on track anyway. I know all about the life cycle, and I'll talk through as a stages approach why we do things. But it is one of those things with mobile applications that you first have to get used to if you've not done before, is that the way they are alive in memory is different than a standard desktop application. So as always, if you've got any comments or questions, do leave them in the video or on the Discord channel, and I'll get back to everybody. And I hope you enjoyed this video.